to hide this tape when I'm finished. If none of us make it, at least there'll be some kind of record. Storm's been hitting us hard now for 48 hours. We still have nothing to go on.
This is We Bleed Orange and Black, the podcast for Halloween and horror lovers. Join us as we interview creators, discuss our favorite horrors, and share original spooky stories. I'm Jesse Carter, and this week we're talking with Robert Ottone. Robert P. Ottone is the author of several horror books, including his collections People, Her Infernal Name and Other Nightmares, and the young adult cosmic horror trilogy, The Rise. His latest novel is The Vile Thing We Created. He is also the owner and publisher of Spooky House Press. How's it going, Robert?
It's going. I apologize that I'm under the weather.
We all are. I had to push from early January because I was not clear of COVID.
I don't blame you. It was really bad the first night. I just felt my temperature was going up and up and up, and then I was paralyzed.
Oh my gosh.
I couldn't turn the TV off. I couldn't turn the light off. It was a lot. It hit me real hard. I had just moved at the time, and I had helped my mom move, so I gave it to her, and I gave it to my brother. Yeah, it was bad. It was real bad. But like so many people during COVID, I worked on 2 books, and the first one was the first book in the Rise trilogy, which came out and just made the preliminary ballot for the Stoker Awards.
Hell yeah.
So I'm pretty happy about that. And I wrote this also, The Vile Thing We Created. So it's like those 2 books are like my tale of COVID times. The triangle specifically is like very trippy and it's very cosmic. And I was in that headspace at the time.
And everything was surreal.
It's true. How she feels in that book, facing something that's totally unknown. And I was kind of getting that from like the beginnings of COVID times specifically, because it's like, well, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I was sort of struggling with the idea of COVID and how it impacted writing and entertainment in general. It's like no one wants to read about pandemics when you're in a pandemic, and everyone's going to be writing about COVID, so you don't want to go where everyone else is going. But I think that's a very interesting approach to channel that larger surreal dissonance that we all went through. We certainly had a peculiar flavor of it in Los Angeles because there were also riots at the time and fires. One of my most vivid memories was masked up, standing in a line outside the grocery store, and all the windows in the grocery store had been preemptively boarded up.
Wow.
And I was like, these are interesting times we're living in.
I remember seeing, I think it was a friend of mine or whatever that lives in Manhattan. And they were taking pictures of the empty streets of Manhattan, like during, times where it would be insanely busy and it was just dead. And I was like, this is 28 days later. Like, this is the beginning of 28 days later. That's what this looks like to me. And I think it's the guy who did Krampus, what's that? I guess it's Krampus, yeah. And he did Trick or Treat. He made like some supercut video about how horror fans should be better prepared to deal with COVID. And I remember thinking like, yeah, he's spot on. And he had so much from The Thing in there. And I was like, oh man, yeah. Especially the part with like, nobody trusts anyone anymore.
Nobody trusts anybody now. We're all very tired.
I definitely feel that way. I'm the only one who still wears a mask. And it's a shame. Like, it sucks. Everybody should just be still trying to do the right thing. Like, I've had pneumonia twice in 3 months. And I'm also dealing with something that's actually, I just got diagnosed today that's cropping up as a result of having COVID. So that's fun.
Silver lining, if there is one to be found with your latest bout of illness, another book? The Hacking.
Yeah, the hacking. There is possible exploratory surgery on the table. So yeah, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah. So fingers crossed.
To run it back a bit and get into your origin story, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. My parents were not ones to be very restrictive with what I watched growing up. which is probably how I saw Halloween when I was like 5 or 4.
Did you identify more with a young Michael Myers?
Maybe I did when I was younger.
He's just like me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I watched like Godzilla 89. I loved that movie. Jaws. My dad's favorite movie was Jaws. So like we watched it all the time. I had like a pretty normal upbringing. I'm still best friends with the 2 best friends I've had since elementary school.
Now, are those friends Michael Myers and Bruce the Shark, or are we talking real people?
No, these are real people. That's like a weird thing too, is growing up painfully normal. Like I played sports in middle school and high school, and I did drama and stuff. We were like a normal crew, and like I just loved horror movies, and like I would get them to watch horror and they loved them too. I also like enjoyed creation. Like I co-wrote our senior play. So I always had like a writing bug in me. So, I went to college and got a bachelor's in English and creative writing. From there, I went into the corporate world and reporting as well. And it was fun, but I didn't like being in a cubicle. So I got my master's, became a teacher. I got an MFA in children's literature, which is not worth the paper it's printed on. And I have a couple other master's degrees as well. But I've started writing again in 2019. After my dad passed away, partially, I had a lot to get out, and it was therapeutic. I had started therapy as well, and it was a very good exercise for me to put all that out. And I got to explore some really darker parts of my feelings and my thoughts. I honestly thought I was going to kill myself after my dad died. I didn't have any interest in being around. I still have very passive interest being around, but thankfully I have a phenomenal therapist. My viewpoint changed so much. Like my wife keeps me grounded, my therapist keeps me grounded, my friends keep me grounded, the writing community keeps me grounded. They're all wonderful and supportive people like you and other authors. I realized too that after my dad passed away, that was easily the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
I'm not like a full Legadian, but I do get his vibe a little bit more now that I'm getting older. I just want to be left alone for the most part. My writing has evolved and sort of reflects that. Like the Vile Thing We Created specifically. I think a lot of people could look at that as like a, not so much a misanthropic novel. I would hope that they don't see it as that. I don't know what you think, but
I have questions and we'll get into it.
There's a lot of like my personal feeling in that. I think like negative. I mean, I'm a teacher. I don't have negative feelings towards children or anything like that, but it's like my own personal feelings towards parenthood are in there. Like, it's difficult. It's a very difficult subject. When I was writing it, my wife was like, wow, you're really this is going to get published? And I was like, you goddamn right. She was worried. I know my mom is going to be worried. There's a character based on her in there. I've told her.
Let's dive into it. I was really impressed with how ruthlessly and honestly, you mind the quagmires of being a couple, pregnancy, parenthood. You have FOMO, marital stress, crazy in-laws, episiotomies, postpartum depression, disappointing children, to say the least. I don't want to give too much away, but there is almost no aspect of modern parenthood that you did not exploit. And I don't mean exploit in the pejorative sense. I mean, you actually took a clear-eyed view at all of these things and braided them together into a rope. I was like, wow, is he married? Does he have kids? How is this going to fly?
I am married. You have kids, you have kids. More power to you. You're in LA. It's expensive to live there. I'm in New York. It's expensive to live here. Adding a kid to the equation would be a disaster. I sleep about 4 hours a night already, so I couldn't afford to lose any more sleep. I work a lot. I work 13-hour days, 2 nights a week. It's just a lot. Having a kid in that equation. My wife works from home. She's a baker, so the main character is very much inspired by my wife in many ways.
I bet she gets up early.
Yeah, she does. She does. She works really hard. She has a phenomenal business, and very proud of her. And I am a teacher, much like the other lead in the book. And a lot of his teaching frustrations are my teaching frustrations. I'm the youngest guy on staff. That is something I wanted reflected in this, how frustrating that can be. I love kids. I find kids to be fun as hell. My niece and nephew are twins. They're a blast. My wife's cousin's kids are the cutest, funnest thing. My friends' kids are cute and fun. I wonder what they're going to think when they read it. You mentioned FOMO, for example. That was a weird one to explore because it started with my friends all coupling off. And then it got worse when they started having kids because then it was play dates. and it was, oh, we're going to have a no kids party. And it's fine. I'm all for a no kids party, but I'm for like a with the kids there party too. You know what I mean? Like I'd like to see their kids too. Like they're cute and fun. And that's really when the FOMO stuff started kicking in. But I understand how lives change. I get it. Now, I'm in a better place after writing this book, I think, in having dealt with that through fiction. And like one of my best friends now has 2 kids. His availability is very minimal too. We had to kidnap him last summer to get a day out of him. We told him that we needed help setting up a pergola, and we just drove out east and went to wineries and stuff. And his wife was in on the ruse. It was awesome. It was like the best day ever. But that's the kind of stuff you have to do. My wife has never, she does not have any children, but I talk to a lot of women, obviously in terms of like, tell me about this experience. Episiotomy was a friend of mine's wife had one of those, and it sounded horrifying. So I got her on the record. The author Evie Knight is a doctor. She's a medical professional, so she gave me a ton to work with as well. I love her. She was like saved the day. But there's a lot of issues that plague women of color when they get pregnant, and I wanted to explore that a little bit too. The note that I got back from one of my early readers is she is a woman of color, and she said that she appreciated how I weaved it in and didn't make like a big deal about it. It was just something in her mind, in Lola, the lead character's mind, pretty consistently. Because in reading this and researching this, it was insane. I was like, good God, having a kid is already hard enough. But this on top of it, it's just too much.
Part of the spell you cast is that no one is blundering into these decisions. They're going into everything with a very sober view, and they are almost buckling under all the terrors that await them. And especially Lola, as a woman of color, knows she has to advocate for herself. When things start to go wrong and the dominoes start falling, she knows she could end up a statistic. She's terrified going into this, and it just makes the whole situation so much more horrifying.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because there was an earlier version of this where chapter 1 just ended with them being pregnant, and it just didn't work because it was like, well, no, because like these are 2 intelligent, forward-thinking people that just wouldn't happen like that.
Yeah.
And, another person gave me some feedback on that too, and they kind of echoed the same thought. And I was like, okay, good. All right. So then I went back and made it how it is. I'm a big fan in horror movies, and it happens so infrequently, where people make clear, conscious, well thought out decisions. Like it almost never happened. Again, I mentioned The Thing a couple of times, like McCready's plan to destroy the base at the end is the best that he can do. And the last time I saw it happen on film in like a recent film or show or whatever was in The Outsider, the adaptation of Stephen King's The Outsider, where all of the main characters know they have to confront this thing, and they're all together in one house, in different sections of the house, in at least a pair. So intelligent and so smart. And it's like, God damn, I wish there was more like that. When I try to write anything, I try to write characters with clear minds, clear hearts to make these decisions the right way. Because I think so often you see a stupid decision to fuel the story, and it doesn't really help narratively, character-wise. Like if they just decided, oh, we're just going to have a kid, instead of rationally talking it through, figuring out their finances, figuring out like, after what happened last time, like, do you really want to do this? That's exactly what couples should do. And I don't see a lot of that going on in real life. I feel like sometimes couples just like, we're having some troubles, let's have a kid. I know some people who've done that, and it's gone awful every single time.
It would be very believable and very grounded to focus on a couple that just had a kid or tried to save a failing marriage by adding a kid into the mix. However, I would not be rooting for that couple.
No, because it's like you're doing a disservice to the child. Like that's the ultimate crime. You're bringing a kid into a very unstable, unhealthy situation right from the jump. And that's not what Lola and Ian are. Like they're very healthy. They're very much in love. They're very, physical with each other still. And they're, he works hard, she works hard, and they have a beautiful life. And the decision to open that life up to another soul or whatever you want to say is ultimately not the best decision. But it's one that they make confidently, at least in the very beginning.
And that's part of the horror, is that they step onto the train tracks and you're like, oh God.
Yeah. I got a note today from someone who was reading the book also, and they were like, oh God, this just happened. And I was like, yeah, it only gets worse from there, man.
Buckle up. The book starts with a mental health clinic and a crisis and an abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Was it hard to make them take the steps on that road, knowing that they've already had one experience with reproductive and mental health?
The hardest part was I didn't want Lola specifically to be looked at as someone who was not ready herself. And I didn't want her to be looked at as someone who was making a poor decision. And it was less about Ian's comfort and confidence than it was about Lola's, because she was the one who had to go through what she went through at the beginning. I looked up a lot of research about women who have gone through that. I've talked to quite a few women who went through that exact scenario. They read those chapters and or that particular chapter, and they were like, sure, yeah, this is about right. It's just difficult because again, like, I don't have that experience. Number one thing I don't ever want is to be on the men writing women Reddit. To me, Lola is the heart of this book. She's the one who we spend probably the most time with. She's the levelest head. She's probably my favorite character that I've written so far.
The circumstances surrounding this pregnancy influence the occult and cosmic horror aspects. I'm curious, since so many of those issues are fixed, dealing with Ian's past, his family, where they're living, if that first child that they conceived had been born, would it have ended up like Jonesy, the child they have at the end of the book?
I think so. I think if they had gone through with it the first time, for sure. And also, honestly, I think the ending would be dramatically different.
Because they were younger, untested, they hadn't been through that initial crisis.
Yeah, they weren't even engaged. They hadn't been together a tremendously long time. They didn't know each other as well. Their love was not as deep. It's really their love that kind of gets them through this whole thing. And again, that actually comes from interviews that I did with friends of mine's partners and stuff who did have abortions when they were younger. And now they have 2 to 3 kids with their husbands. And you do it when you're ready. It's kind of what they kind of all echoed to me. And if you're not with the right person, you don't do it. Jonesy was not. Having him early on would have been the worst possible decision for Lola and Ian. So really, they make 2 good decisions in this book.
I would say 3, because getting a cat is always a good call.
Hell yeah, man. I can't wait to get, I want to get a trio of cats. I'm dying for cats. I'm so allergic, but whatever. They're so cute.
I noticed that in many of your stories, there is a fictional town called Resting Hollow.
Yeah.
Is that your Derry, Maine?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's my idealized Hudson Valley-ish town. It's part Sleepy Hollow, part Catskills. We're talking about moving up there, the wife and I. So
to Resting Hollow? I don't know, man. That place is creepy.
Yeah, I love it up there. I feel super energized up there, breathing that air, seeing the mountains, seeing the woods. It's just everything that I want out of New York. Like I live in like the metro part of, like, Long Island is basically like an extension of metro New York, and it's congested and there's people everywhere. Our taxes are ridiculous and the houses are stupid expensive, and it's a lot. Whereas up there, it's a little slower paced. Some of the Native American history up there is just wonderful. I love diving into that stuff and the history of the people who came to the region. So when creating Resting Hollow, I created a geographical document for all of the different locations and the different sections of the Resting Hollow area. So there's like Lakeside, there's Kirkbride's Bluff, there's Apple Valley, which actually my current work in progress is set entirely in Apple Valley. I just wanted Derry meets Silent Hill. That's kind of what I'm trying to put together. It's just a rich area. The way I've described it sort of in the past is like you can live in Resting Hollow your whole life and never see or experience any kind of spooky shit. Or you could be like Lola or Ian and have something happen to you that is very out of the realm of reality. Yeah, I love that area. I do wish it was real. I wish I could live there. I would be like, who's the guy in It from Derry? Bill Denbrough. I could be like him.
Did you grow up in upstate New York?
I'm not from there originally. My dad's side of the family is from sort of the Sleepy Hollow-ish area. Sleepy Hollow specifically is very in my DNA. I'm a member of the Irving Society. I love Washington Irving so much. I think the greatest American ghost story of all time is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So I just feel very much connected to that area. I'm drawn to it like constantly. And almost everything that I write, I'm drawn there. I'm working on one thing set on Long Island.
What's going on with the crazy Lyme disease tick explosion going on in Long Island?
Oh, yeah. We have an ungodly amount of deer. They are, so like New York City has the problem with rats. Long Island has a problem with deer, but they carry with them so much disease and it's just so gross. And they're not, they're just animals. They don't know. I won't walk through tall grass ever on Long Island or anywhere really.
You just stick to sidewalks?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Or trails or whatever. And even then it's pretty dicey. Growing up, I had friends whose moms all had Lyme disease because they all got bit by ticks.
I remember growing up, we took a little trip to Lyme, Connecticut, home of Lyme disease. And we like swam across this lake. We were strong enough to swim across it once, but we couldn't swim across it twice. And then there were no paths or trails. So we just had to crawl through the brush all the way around the lake to get back. And the whole time I was thinking like, oh God, I'm going to get Lyme disease. Like, this is it for me.
I remember being a kid and I had tall socks on and we like traipsed through like this tiniest little bit of tall grass. And I looked down, socks were covered in ticks.
Ugh.
And the teacher came over, plucked them all off really quick, and like killed them, whatever. But that shit is scary, man. Like your whole immune system gets destroyed by a bug bite. Like, it's insane. It is so insane.
Something that lives in the salivary glands of a tiny little pinprick insect. It is terrifying.
Ugh.
As the owner of Spooky House Press, can you tell us a little bit about some of the books you've published and what kind of things you look for in a project?
Our most recent release, Into the Gray by Kathleen Palm. It's our first step into sort of the middle grade, almost, younger reader territory. It's a brilliant, brilliant book. She's incredible. We published Patrick Barb's Helicopter Parenting in the Age of Drone Warfare and Becca Harrison's The White Horse. All three of those books, and I only mention those because they're the most recent. I mention those three because they're so dramatically different. Kathleen Palm's book is a little more horror fantasy, whereas Patrick's book is strict sci-fi horror and scared the shit out of me when I read it. And Rebecca Harrison's book is very much gothic, folk, Victorian horror. She plays with a lot and she's just a brilliant writer. So I look for something that's interesting, a premise that's interesting, and something that really like grabs me right away. So like with our most recent open call, I asked for like the first 10 pages. All the things that we're putting out grabbed me immediately. And I made offers as quick as I could. I like weird, experimental, transgressive stuff. We have a book coming out by a guy named TJ Price that is probably the strangest thing we've ever put out. And we're doing some stuff with the formatting with that particular book that's very bizarre and very out there. I don't know how people are going to react to it, but I'm excited to see people react to it. We have a lot of good stuff coming out. We have another really great folk horror novella coming out by Elizabeth Davidson. So I guess like folk horror, ghost stories, a really good monster story. That like really gets me going.
Did you have a local horror host growing up? You're a creature feature guy. I know you grew up watching a lot of horror movies.
I guess my dad would have been my creature feature horror guy. We have Zachary the Cool Ghoul was on TV here for the longest time. And my dad grew up a big fan of him. And I got to meet him and he was lovely. He was the sweetest, funniest old man. Oh, Joe Bob. My dad and I would watch Joe Bob on TNT. I met him too. He is gigantic. I met Darcy the Mail Girl, Diana Prince also. My mom too. My mom would play horror host as well. And my mom would take me out of school early to go see movies.
Oh, hell yeah.
I remember we did that with Jurassic Park. I was like 9. She took me out of the theater. I was the only kid in the elementary school who had read Jurassic Park. And I was so happy that Malcolm actually lived in the movie because in the book, he does not. And he was my favorite. I think Event Horizon was another one I got taken out of school to see. Like my mom was cool as shit, man. Yeah, she still is cool, even though I based a character in this book on her.
Are there any local legends or cryptids or urban legends in your area or in the upstate New York area that have always captured your imagination?
Yeah. Thank God my wife is not here because she makes so much fun of me when I look at this stuff. But Bigfoot is a thing, upstate New York, Sasquatch. I wrote a whole book about Bigfoot in upstate New York called Nocturnal Creatures. I really love that book. That was fun as hell to write. And it was also cool because I got to set it in the 90s. I think the 80s are done. Here on Long Island, we obviously the Amityville horror is either phony or they'll tell you that the family that lives there now still calls the cops over stuff that happens. We have the Montauk Monster, which was an inspiration for Stranger Things. So Stranger Things was supposed to be called Montauk. I do a lot of true crime lectures all over Long Island. We have the Long Island serial killer, also known as the Gilgo Beach killer, also known as the Craigslist killer. Never been caught, never will be.
Trying to see if I can segue from serial killers to trick-or-treating.
We could segue into that. So, when you think about it, right, especially post 9/11 New York, trick-or-treating was basically done. Kids don't really trick-or-treat like they did. When we were younger, trick-or-treating was legit. That shit was here on Long Island, it was like the scene in E.T. times 10. We used to get thousands, I'm not kidding, thousands of people at my parents' house every Halloween because we would do a haunted house on the front lawn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I stopped trick-or-treating in 5th grade because it became time to help my dad build and execute these haunted houses. I would still get to wear costumes. And in fact, my costumes got even more elaborate because I was playing different characters in the haunted house. My favorite one, I made a guy named Booster Boots, who was a skeleton heavy metal chainsaw guy. It was the one year I got to work the chainsaw. That was so much fun. So we were always doing that. And then 9/11 happens. And then it's nobody go out. Nobody go out. So no kids really come out anymore, and it's really sad. But I have wonderful memories of trick-or-treating when I was a kid. I was Dracula when I was little, 3 years in a row. I was Michael Myers 2 years in a row. God, it was just so much fun. It was I had the best Halloweens. I still have great Halloweens. It's harder for me because the holiday is so much rooted in my dad.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's the only time. That's not true. I feel close to him all the time, but at Halloween time, I feel the closest to him. So I welcome it when it comes. And it took me a while to realize that. He passed in 2019. It's 2023 now. It took me up until this past Halloween to realize that this is when I feel the closest to him, is when the Spooks Inspectors are in the air.
It sounds like so many of your best experiences, from the haunted house on your lawn to the unofficial horror movie hosting, are all wrapped up in incredible memories of your father.
Yeah, big time. I was very lucky, and the times that we had were just fabulous. We would go to haunted houses together. The last Halloween when he was sick, I went to my favorite haunted house, which is this all for charity haunted house on the East End. It's for a camp for special needs children. It's called Spooky Walk. It's my favorite one. $20 a person. It's an hour-long walk in haunted woods.
Oh, God.
Then it takes you into the cabins, and each cabin is done up differently. There's 5 or 6 cabins. And it was just incredible. And the year my dad couldn't go because he couldn't really walk, in my opinion, the best year.
Oh.
And so I went to see him in the hospital, and he was like, "How was Spooky Walk?" And I wanted to lie to him and tell him it was terrible. But I knew that he would appreciate that they did a really good job. And I was like, "Dad, honestly, it was the best I think it might have ever been."
Oh, my gosh.
He was happy. He was happy to hear that.
I'm legit jealous. Out here in LA, our Halloween game is pretty damn strong.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I wish we had some haunted woods to spook around in. That sounds amazing.
You have Halloween Horror Nights, though, right?
I think having been in the game at such a young age and getting to see sort of the excellent unhinged experimental aspect of things like Spooky Walk, you would really be disappointed with the modern incarnation of Halloween Horror Nights. It used to be incredible and very free-flowing. Now, to deal with the incredible crowds and the 3-hour wait times, they have had to standardize everything into little 20-second packets. So, you step into a wall and Michael Myers comes out, there's a jump scare sting on the soundtrack, and then you turn the corner and there's another Michael Myers with the same jump scare sting sound effect. And then you turn a corner and there's another Michael Myers. And the idea is that they want everyone to see everything,
sure,
but it's a conga line. You know, you were going through nuts to butts, human centipede, winding through this house. There's no more of that, okay, you go in alone or just with a small group of friends and you don't know what's coming, or someone could hop out behind you. The crowds are so insane that they've had to restructure the whole haunt to this sort of automated experience. You know, post 9/11, they shut down all theme parks everywhere. And when they reopened, I noticed, sadly, Horror Nights has become much more rigid and structured and contained. And they have bored teenagers lining all the walls of every inch of the maze. And they're not all dressed like Michael Myers. They're dressed in cheap polyester cloaks, and they have flashlights, and they're just waving you through. You know, it's like a fire safety thing. So you're like, okay, there's Laurie Strode, there's Michael Myers, and there's 15 bored teenagers that are just waving me through. And it kind of breaks immersion.
Yeah, that sucks.
It does kind of suck. And that's why I have been voting with my dollars and going to more of the smaller experimental things where they just find a fucked up old warehouse and they're like, okay, we can create something here.
I love that you said voting with my dollars, because I say that all the time.
Yeah. It ain't cheap, man. Horror Nights ain't cheap. I could go on, and I have, so I won't anymore. Instead, I will ask you to let our listeners know, where can they find out more about you and Spooky House Press?
You can follow me on Instagram at Robert Ottone. You can follow Spooky House Press on Instagram at Spooky House Press. You can follow me on Twitter at Robert Ottone and at Spooky House Press, but with one S at the end. You can also go to spookyhousepress.com.
Thanks for coming on. This was awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, man. Been waiting. I'm excited to be on here.
It has been in the works for a little while, and I really appreciate connecting me with some of the authors you work with and getting to see your cool books, man. It's been really nice. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at webobpodcast. Contact us at webobpod@gmail.com or subscribe on iTunes. You can find Ryan at 20th Century RG with the number 20 on YouTube, and you can find me at jeffccarter.com and hit the link to pick up my collection, We Bleed Orange and Black, 31 fun-sized tales for Halloween. Until next time, stay spooktacular.
Nobody trusts anybody, you know. There's nothing else I can do. Just wait. RJ McCready, helicopter pilot, U.S. Outpost North 31.